You woke up this morning with a scratchy throat, maybe a headache. So you walked to your medicine cabinet, grabbed a tiny white pill, swallowed it with water, and went on with your day. You didn't even think about it for 2 seconds. That pill? That one boring little tablet you just downed without a second thought? Your ancestors would have literally killed for it. Because 50,000 years ago, what you just experienced, a scratchy throat, a mild headache, wasn't a Tuesday inconvenience. It was potentially a death sentence, unless your entire tribe did something about it, fast. And what they actually did is so much weirder, darker, and more impressive than anything you learned in school. Let's start with something that sounds completely impossible. In 2017, researchers digging through a burial site at Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq found something that broke a lot of assumptions about Neanderthals. Quick refresher, Neanderthals were our close ancient relatives, living across Europe and Asia until about 40,000 years ago. Basically our weird cousins who didn't make it to the family reunion of modern humanity. They found the remains of a man who'd lived to roughly 40 to 50 years old, genuinely old for a Neanderthal. But his age wasn't the shocking part, his bones were. His right arm had been amputated. He was partially blind. He had severe arthritis through his spine and joints. This man could not hunt. He could not gather food. By literally every rule of survival in that era, he should have died decades earlier. His tribe fed him, protected him, cared for him for years. That's the oldest evidence of healthcare on Earth. Not a hospital, not a doctor's office, a campfire 60,000 years ago, and people who decided one of their own was worth keeping alive, even though he contributed 0 hunting and 0 gathering. Somewhere, that guy is the original "we don't leave people behind" story, and nobody even wrote it down for 60 millennia. But care alone wasn't enough. They needed something stronger. They had plants. Long before anyone had ever heard the words bacteria, virus, or inflammation, ancient humans were running the longest, most brutal clinical trial in history, through trial, error, and a truly staggering number of deaths, to figure out which plants helped and which plants finished you off permanently. The proof is sitting right there in the archaeological record. Take Ötzi the Iceman, the famous 5,300-year-old mummy found frozen solid in the Alps. When scientists searched through his belongings, they found a tiny medical kit. Inside, 2 pieces of birch polypore mushroom, strung on a leather cord like some kind of ancient first aid keychain. For years, nobody knew why he was carrying mushrooms around like trail mix. Then they tested the mushroom. Birch polypore has antibiotic and anti-inflammatory properties. And here's the kicker. Ötzi also had intestinal parasites, and that same mushroom has anti-parasitic effects in modern studies. He wasn't carrying decorative fungus for fun. The man was self-medicating 5,000 years before pharmacies existed. And Ötzi is actually one of the more recent examples. The relationship between humans and medicinal plants goes back way further than that. Archaeologists studying ancient Neanderthal dental plaque. Yes, scientists study fossilized plaque. That's a real job someone has. Found traces of plants with literally 0 nutritional value at a site called El Cedrón in Spain. Among them, yarrow and chamomile, both with documented medicinal properties. The Neanderthals weren't eating these for calories. There's nothing in there. They were eating them because the plants worked. And this was at least 50,000 years ago. Then there's willow bark. Humans have been chewing on this stuff for at least 500 years, all the way back to ancient Egyptian medical papyri. The active compound in willow bark is called salicin. Your body converts salicin into salicylic acid. In 1897, chemists at Bayer took that exact compound, synthesized a stable version of it, and called it aspirin. So that boring little white pill in your medicine cabinet, same molecule your ancestors were ripping directly off a tree with their teeth. You're not taking modern medicine. You're taking ancient medicine with better branding. Now here's where it gets considerably darker. When plants weren't enough, ancient humans went further, much further. In 2018, researchers studying a Neolithic skull from Spain made a discovery that genuinely unsettled the medical world. This skull, roughly 5,000 years old, had a hole cut into it, not from an accident, from a human hand holding a stone tool on purpose, and the edges showed clear signs of healing, meaning this person survived the procedure. This is called trepanation. It's the oldest known surgical procedure in human history, and it shows up on literally every inhabited continent: Peru, France, Russia, China, all across Africa. The oldest examples are over 7,000 years old. What were they even trying to fix? Researchers think it was used for severe headaches, seizures, mental illness, and skull fractures. Basically anything that seemed to be coming from inside the head. The logic was, something's wrong in there, so let's open it up and let it out. Which sounds insane until you realize that's literally how ancient humans were reverse engineering medicine without ever seeing a single cell. And here's the part that should genuinely blow your mind. The survival rate was not low. Studies on Neolithic trepanation skulls suggest somewhere between 50 and 90% of patients survived, based on bone regrowth around the cut edges. These weren't desperate, panicked, one-time experiments. These were practiced, repeated, refined procedures passed down through generations like a terrifying family recipe. But somebody had to be running this whole operation. Someone who knew exactly which plant to use, how to cut a skull without immediately killing the patient, and, critically, when not to do any of it. The shaman. In virtually every hunter-gatherer society anthropologists have ever studied, there's one figure who sits exactly at the crossroads of medicine and the supernatural. The shaman, the healer, the medicine man. Title depends on the culture, but the job is the same. And, honestly, this might be the single most important job in the entire tribe. A skilled hunter could keep the group fed for a week. The shaman's knowledge could keep the entire group alive for an entire generation. A 2021 study, published in PLOS One, looked at burial sites from the Natufian culture in the Eastern Mediterranean, dating back about 12,000 years. One particular grave stood out hard. The body belonged to a woman in her 40s. Buried alongside her, over 50 tortoise shells, parts of an eagle, a leopard, a wild boar, a cow, and, this is not a typo, a human foot. Researchers are fairly confident she was a shaman. The most elaborately, carefully buried person at the entire site wasn't a chief or a warrior, it was the healer. These people weren't just out there mixing random herbs and hoping for the best. They were the community's memory. Decades of accumulated medical knowledge lived entirely inside one person's head, passed along through practice, story, and ritual. Lose the shaman, and the tribe didn't just lose a person, they lost their entire medical library in a single afternoon. And then there's fever, which modern medicine got wrong for an embarrassingly long time. For decades, doctors aggressively tried to suppress fevers, ice baths, medication, get that temperature down immediately. Fever bad. Turns out that instinct was wrong. Fever isn't your body malfunctioning. It's your immune system cranking up the thermostat specifically to kill off pathogens that physically cannot survive past a certain temperature. It's not a glitch, it's a feature. Ancient humans understood this. Not scientifically, obviously, but intuitively. Ethnographic studies of living hunter-gatherer groups today show the exact same consistent pattern. When someone spikes a fever, they get moved closer to the fire and kept warm, not cooled down. Their bodies are allowed to do their thing and burn. It took modern science until basically the last century to figure out the actual immunological mechanism behind why that ancient instinct was right the entire time. Your ancestors didn't have germ theory. They had 300,000 years of watching people die from infection, and that brutal, relentless feedback loop quietly taught them what worked. The knowledge wasn't written in any book. It was coded directly into behavior, passed down like an oral software update. Here's the part that's quietly devastating though. Researchers estimate that roughly 25% of children in ancient hunter-gatherer societies died before age 5, mostly from infection and disease. 1 in 4. Just gone, before their 5th birthday, over and over, for hundreds of thousands of years. And yet the species survived anyway. It survived because of birch mushrooms strung on a leather cord, because of willow bark chewed by someone who had no idea what salicin even was, because of a shaman buried with 50 tortoise shells and a single human foot, because of trepanation skulls that somehow, against absurd odds, healed, because a tribe in a cave in Iraq looked at a man with no arm and failing eyes and decided he was still worth keeping around. The next time you swallow an aspirin without thinking twice, you're completing a line that stretches back 50,000 years, all the way back to someone crouched in a cave, chewing on the bark of a tree, with zero idea why it was helping, just knowing that it did. We didn't invent medicine, we inherited it, and almost all of it was discovered completely by accident. No labs, no clinical trials, no idea bacteria or viruses even existed. Just human beings stuck in a brutal, repeating cycle. Someone gets sick, someone tries something. Most of the time, it fails, but every once in a while, it works. And when it did, that single piece of information outlived the person who discovered it. That's what medicine actually was. Originally, not science, memory. And even now, we're still doing the exact same thing. Testing, observing, adjusting, passing knowledge forward. The only real difference is that, today, the experiments happen behind white walls and complicated scientific language instead of around a fire. But underneath all of it, still the same species, still just trying to survive long enough to understand itself.